Okay, good afternoon. My name is Malcolm West. I'm the Managing Director of Project in a Box, and I'm just doing a re-recording of the presentation Method in the Madness, Not Madness in the Method, that I gave at Project Challenge at the end of March in the UK, following requests from a few people for the slides. I thought it'd be much nicer to see the full effect of the tour, so just re-recorded that here. Okay, so the thesis of this presentation is that there are so many methods and frameworks that people are asked to approach and apply to their projects and programs and portfolios and ways of working now. It's almost a week doesn't go by without another one coming out. These are some of the many that we get asked about on a regular basis, and then that's before we even start to think about the sector or domain specific materials. So if you work in construction, you might work up against the REBA principles. If you work in IT, there'll be particular sets of IT principles, domain aspects that you need to respond to. Every organisation has their own particular methods and processes. People always have their own particular way of dealing with finances, technical, quality assurance, particular forms and information they must collect at key points in their project to meet their own quality requirements. And then there's the key sort of legislative and legal aspects of delivery, particular documents we need to keep, how long do we need to keep things for, searching things. There's the whole SOX compliance sort of area. So there's a massive amount of things that people need to think about in delivering projects that goes way beyond the sort of traditional way of thinking about projects as plans, basically. So a whole load of tensions and issues around that. These are just some of the sort of questions that we hear regularly. How might we merge all these methods? Which ones should we use? Do we need to apply them in different ways for different sizes of project? How can we get the most value from these? How can we be sure that we're actually delivering against them? Two sort of big ones at the bottom: is my organisation mature enough to cope? Are my people capable enough to cope? And that's not something I'm going to aim to answer here. You see here lots of presentations on those sort of subjects about maturity and capability frameworks for project managers. There's plenty of materials there, and I can point you in the direction of some of that if you're interested. The main focus of this presentation is a purely practical one, talking about approaches and tools that you can take to actually do some of these things, to merge some of these things together. So we're going to be talking about scaling approaches to methodology, so that's adjusting the method for the particular size and complexity of the project. Personalization, so making these things match your own organisation and circumstances and technical domains, etc. And integrating multiple methods. So this is the sort of killer thing: how to put bits of Agile and Prince2 and MSP and ITIL and other approaches and frameworks into the same method, into the same technique that you're going to apply to your projects. And all the way through here we're going to be treading a fine balance between consistency and flexibility. We find all the time customers saying what we really want is consistency. We want all of our projects to be managed in essentially the same sort of way. It makes it easier for the project managers, easier for the team members, easier for the assurance. But actually we don't want that to be completely rigid, because we recognise our projects are a bit different each time, in some cases very different, and therefore we need flexibility built into that, and that's a very difficult balance to achieve all the time. So we'll be referring back to that on a constant sort of basis. Okay, so firstly we're going to have a bit of a look at the idea of scaling, and we're going to firstly address that via the traditional way that people may have often implemented management methodologies. So let's have a think about the projects in our organisation. We could look at the projects and we could see that we'd have some projects that are very low complexity, we'd have some projects that are very high complexity, but the majority are going to fit somewhere in the middle of that curve. The majority of them are going to be of some sort of average level of difficulty, complexity, whatever we want to measure that on. Now quite often the organisation says, right, this is the standard we're going to apply to delivering projects, and we used to see this all the time. People would say, Prince2, it's a standard, you deliver it against all of your projects in the same way, and they generally pitch that at a fairly high sort of level. This meant that some projects were effectively being undermanaged, but the vast majority were being overmanaged, and it led to the idea that Prince2 and methodologies of its type were bureaucratic. heavy, cumbersome, led to the people not using them, particularly on commercial projects, because they felt they'd be killing the margin in the project by doing too much documentation. That's when applying a sort of rigid method, I guess like people perceived Prince2 to be, but also when people develop their own in-house methods, they'd quite often go to the experts for project management in the organisation, the people that often delivered the very complex and big top-end projects, and they'd say, what do we need to do on projects? So they would look at their own sort of experience and say, well, you need to do all these sorts of things. So they would tend to drag it up to the top level each time. Quite often when I talk to people about projects and methodologies and templates, they say, we'll get the templates which are the most complete versions, we'll apply those to all our projects, the ones with the most things to fill out, because that's the safest thing to do. But actually, that can then really burden your smaller, less complex projects, which don't really need it. So we still see this sort of thing all the time, and actually that's because organisations, as I say, tend to default to liking the idea of consistency. The ultimate consistency is to have one way of doing things. Now let's have a different look on that same sort of idea. So I've got a typical project scope. I've got a description of what a project should be, what we're trying to deliver, what the circumstances of it are, and I'm going to give it to 5 different project managers and ask them for their interpretation of the sort of management structures we should apply. And this idea comes from actually the much better way that Prince2 deals with tailoring to the project environment now, which there's a separate chapter in the manual called Tailoring the Project to the Project Environment, where project managers are encouraged to take the full method and say, well, actually, for my particular circumstances of this project, I'm going to revise the method to match the project. I'm going to perhaps merge some bits and take some bits out, perhaps add some extra elements in from my particular business perspective, and I'm going to get a sort of customized version of Prince2 that's relevant to my project. So if we ask 5 different project managers to do that against one description of a project, you'll get 5 different answers. They'll depend on the particular project manager's experience and preferences, and that will come through in the answers they give. They'll see the project as having a different sort of level of complexity. Some will see it more complex than others, and then depending on the complexity, they'll apply or the threat levels, etc. They will apply an appropriate level of management solution at the amount of documentation and process they think is relevant. And we'll end up with a sort of span across that, which could be quite large, and in many organisations you'll see is actually very, very big. If we give them another description of a project and ask them to do the same thing again, you'll find again you get a spread of things. Now, hopefully you'll see a reasonable trend in that, so that the little blue-faced person always seems to find things relatively less complex than the green person, and they apply different sorts of strength of documentation. But sometimes you find people not really getting the difference between the projects. So in this case we've got the little brown-faced person here getting things to be broadly the same. And again we get a sort of span of things. And we can do the same thing again and again with a project description and asking people to tailor a method to match it. What we've got here now is we started with a consistent standard method, and what we've ended up with is something that's not standard at all. We've got everybody applying their own particular preferences and insights, and we end up with something that's all over the place. And that's sort of okay from the project manager's perspective. They've put their perspective on it, their glasses on it, and they've come up with a structure that they feel is right for them. But if we think about the team members that are working across lots of projects at the same time, they might be working on projects for 3 or 4 project managers. They might be working on a project for the yellow person here, the green person and the blue person. Now they might look at 3 different projects that they think are broadly the same sort of project, but actually they'll see massively different documentation and structure in each one. And so that's where the real problem starts to come from the team member's perspective. Also, we spend a lot of time tailoring this for every new project at the beginning, and actually we often find that we train project managers in a methodology like Prince2, we train them in the entire structured method, and then the first thing we say is go away and tailor this to your project. The very thing that they need some experience of doing the method to be able to do is the first thing they're asked to do when they don't have any experience of it. So you tend to find that people don't actually do it very well, and they tend to not lighten it very much, even for a very small project. So we see both of these sorts of problems. Either people being too rigid, okay, they get a consistent and shared understanding, but they've been far too rigid, not allowing for flexibility, ending up with the message of bureaucratic. Or we end up with people doing something flexible and fit for purpose for the perspective of each project, but from the organisation's perspective, something that actually looks quite chaotic. So there is luckily a third way to this, which is the idea of scaling. So very similar to the last little look we had of our projects, we've got the same chart here. This is the difficulty or complexity of the project, and this is the size or scope of the management solution. Now in this scaling approach, what we do is we set up some sort of assessment for our projects. So the common thing that people do is they look back through their projects and they try and score them historically and see how successful or unsuccessful they've been, categorise their projects into some common groupings. So people use things like value or turnover of a project, or the cost of a project, the level of risk, the experience of the project manager, the level of innovation involved, whether the customer is well known and we've had good experiences with them. They find these risk factors, the things that generally drive the success or failure of the project, and then they sort of start to score them. So you say, if this is my difficulty or complexity of project down here, if my project scores in this area, I'm going to give it this starting position. This is going to be the methodology I apply to all projects that sit in this area. So it's a fixed starting point. Now we may let you then tailor away from that slightly, not a great deal, but a little bit, but you must start with that base set of documentation. You add some extra things on if they're particularly important, tailoring for the domain aspect of the project, the technical sort of work that you're doing. If your project drops into this mid area, then you start with this starting point and you tailor away from that. If it's a really big complex project, you start at another particular point and tailor for that, recognizing that as you get into a more complex project, actually the amount of tailoring that needs to be done is probably a bit bigger. So you have these defined starting points, so we're getting some consistency, some clear consistency in terms of the project management documentation that we expect to see of projects. And people working on projects will know if they're working on a project which is of a sort of mid complexity, they're going to be using these documents. If they're working on a small complexity project, they're going to be using these lower level of documents. And that starts to get that consistency in, but it also gives us an element of flexibility. So flexibility at two levels. Firstly, we can tailor that method that we've got to add extra things in to handle complexity or variance in the technical area that's being delivered. But also we can identify some of these things and handle them specifically different. So assuming this was the chart for an engineering company, very happy delivering engineering projects, but they know that when they do IT projects they tend to not do them particularly well. So they recognise that when they're delivering an internal IT project, they start from a distinctly more substantial set of documentation, perhaps the same sort of set they would use normally on a mid-level complexity project. Okay, so how does all that feel in practice? Well, this is our scaled standard methodology based on Prince2 that we use in our commercial products. We have a very low complexity project here aimed at a single deliverable, so it's a key part of the decision process about which project methodology to use. Single deliverable, start, deliver, close. It's got pre-grouped processes and a very modest set of documentation against it. So in the chart below we can see green cells where a particular document is required in each of the processes, and a black cell where we've got an empty holder where we're expecting to collect something as we progress through our project. As we come onto a mid-complexity project, this is for multiple deliverables in a more complex environment, and here we have stages for managing multiple project deliverables and groupings of them, and that means stage plans and all the complexity associated with all that. And then we've broken out risks and issues and lessons and things of that type from the daily log, where they were just managed in the lighter method. So building up the complexity, but any document that appears in this lighter method appears also in the mid-complexity method with some extra things added on. So people moving up from working on small projects to mid-sized projects, they're not left behind, they're starting from the same base and then they're adding extra things on top of that. When we come up to the full method, this is based on the full standard Prince 2, all the management products and processes as laid out in the manual. So we've got that full level of methodology that can be then tailored to match the requirements of any large complex project. So relatively simple steps, but clear blue water between each of these in terms of the documentation, the processes, the approach that's used, and it means people working on typical size of project, they just know it's familiar environment, they know as soon as they open the project up what sort of project it is from the look and feel of it. Okay, so let's go and have a look at some of that in practice. So here I have within Project in a Box one of my very small projects. It's our lightest type of methodology. And how does this work as people work their way through? Well, when you create a new project, you create it from the standard method template. There's a standard starting definition for this. We'll have a look at that just in a second. And the user simply clicks on the box in the process and they get the documentation that's set up for that particular process. So in this one we have the sort of things we might expect to have. We have a project mandate. When we hover on project mandate, it tells us what we need to do with it, so there's some guidance that comes with it, and as we work our way down through the rest of the documentation and hover, we get to see what we need to do. Now in many of these actually comes a template. So I can see here I had a project mandate template, which is now being version controlled, so the system manages that for me, and I can simply click in the tree here to get the current available version of the mandate back for me to view, and we can see that there. And I can work my way down through the documentation, set out in order, so I progress through it as I need to. And as I mentioned, we can tailor these methods, if we're the project manager, to suit the requirements of the particular project we're delivering. So H&S, health and safety, isn't a document that we normally have in a project of this type, but if it's something we're doing on site, for example, we might want to have something in of that type. So that's been added into this particular project. And we can work our way down through the documentation, viewing it if we want to, or checking it out and making some changes to it, checking it back in to create new versions. And then when we get to the end of that process and move on to the next one, deliver, it then shows us the documents that are relevant here. Now it's a different set of documentation, so we're getting away from that problem that people have with folders in Windows Explorer when they try to build their own documentation archives. You end up with one folder with all your documents in and all the versions of them, because your PID can't appear in two processes, two different folders at the same time, and you end up with all 10 versions of it sat in the same folder, so it really starts to become complex very quickly. Of course here, because we're managing it from the database, we show just the documents that are relevant. So after we finish the start process, the mandate isn't relevant to us anymore. We're into PIDs, we're into work packages, project plans, etc., producing highlight reports, and then we move on to close, and we're interested in closing out the project. So again, we go down to a different set of documentation. So really very straightforward, very consistent. Obviously we can alter the structure of these things if we want to match the particular requirements of the project, but broadly the structure and the standard set of documents is going to be the same each time. And we can see that very quickly if we go away and add a new project. So if I come into here, manage projects, as an administrator, I can pick the project method I'm interested in. So I've got a whole load of methods here available to me. I'm going to pick this particular one we've just been looking at, create a new project from it, which we'll call new 019. It's a catchy name. So that's taken the standard method template for a project of that type and launched it onto the system. Now I can come back into my list of projects and find that project. Here it is. and we'll see as we open this up that it's an absolutely blank project of this type, all the documents created on today's date and time. And if I click into here to view this file, we can see we've got a blank file of that type, and it's got its project name in and the version number, etc. So standard set of documents. As we can see, there's no health and safety document on this particular one, and that's as we'd expect because it was a tailored element, and we've got a completely, say, blank project there for us. So we could then, as the project manager or the PMO, tailor it as we need to, or for the project team, they can just get in and get started with it. Obviously, project manager might want to fill in plans and PIDs and things of that type, but they may want to share doing that with their project team as well. So that's the very lightest method. Key thing to point out about this one actually is that it has no stages. So as I mentioned, into the top project level of information is built the things you would normally manage in a stage, the deliverable side of things like work packages, etc., highlight reporting. In the more complex methods that support multiple stages, so if I come back to my portfolio here and pick this particular project, which is to deliver a new head office, if I click into the processes here, we'll see I've got documentation at my start level. It's a much more substantial set than I had in my start at my previous project, and it also supports stages. So here, if I look down into the documents that are relevant for each particular stage, the only thing we'd show at control start is the product descriptions, which we'd produce as we worked our way down here. But as I then come into, for example, managing stages, we can see I've got a sort of summary project controls type feel up at the project level, and I've got a lot more documentation that I'm working on down at the stage level. And this then supports repeatable packages of that documentation. So we've got much more complete structured method. To many people this will feel like a fairly full print too, but actually it's still got a number of documents, management products, etc., merged down and simplified for a less complex project environment. But then, as I say, if we have a very, very complex project environment, we can come through and manage our project in that way. So I can pick this one here, and here we've got full print model with all the separate processes shown. Actually, we can come back here and view the themes and the like if we want to, but if we think about it from a project process perspective, if I come down into starting up a project, actually, because this one has the 40-odd management products involved, I can then drill down in lower levels of detail to them. So we've broken down the processes into sub-processes here, and I can see I've then got exactly the documents as the manual would recommend at each step. And this one's had some tailoring done as well. It's had some tailoring for permissions actually, so my user can't view the daily log or any of its content, and that's something that Project in a Box has built in as standard permissions around who gets to access or see or do things with the documentation within the project. And again, that's part of the customization the project manager or the PMO will do on the project. Okay, so that's scaling in terms of our standard methods. So our systems come with these standard 3 methods for Prince2, so that you can pick those and work with them. And actually it comes with a very simple little tool to help you think about how you might decide which method is appropriate. As I say, you need to have some way of choosing which method is appropriate for you. So we have this little method picker here, takes you through some key questions about your project and guides you on which method you should use. Now, this is something, again, customers must tailor because different customers have different feelings about these sort of things. But basically, if we come through here and say it's a very big, complex project, it's got a significant amount of risk involved in it, it then pushes us up to working on a different method. So let's have a look back at our PowerPoint. So the way we do that is to use this thing called a method template, which I just mentioned a few times now. It is a definition of a project. That's the best way to think about it. of a project approach or project methodology. It defines the set of processes, the names of the processes we're going to use, the navigation structure for working our way around those, the combination of diagrams we're going to point and click at, and as we then come into each particular process from one of these diagrams, which documents do we want to see shown in each process? And within the documents, do we want the documents to contain files or not to contain files? What guidance, hints and tips do we want on them? What flags do we want to set on them? And what properties and numbering and naming conventions are we going to use on our project as a whole? Are we going to use a very simple numbering convention like 1, 2, 3, 4? Are we going to use 1A, 1B, 1C, etc.? So you can define all these sort of things for your particular type of project. And as part of that, you can define the data required for reporting. What properties do we want to collect for this sort of project? Are we interested in recording the sponsor, the project manager, the business area, the particular products that we're delivering with it, etc.? What data are we wanting to collect in terms of project controls, risk issue, quality, lessons learned, finances, planning data? What custom sort of data are we collecting? Are we collecting ID tags or asset numbers if it's an IT project? Are we collecting snags or health and safety data if it's a construction project? Anything like that that we're choosing to collect, we can build in as standard to our method template. And those standard data blocks also feed out into reporting format, so that's also defined within the starting method template. So we've seen just a couple of examples of those very briefly in our standard ones earlier, but the next key thing is personalizing. So in personalizing, I'm just going to take you through quickly a personalization example that we've done for Global Crossing, one of our customers who've been using Project in a Box for getting on for 2 years now. So they've kindly given us permission to show you their projects. So what I can do is come to my portfolios here, and I've got a portfolio of telecoms projects. And so these projects are using the Global Crossing methods, and they've determined that they want to use 2 different types of method templates for delivering the standard sort of projects that they deliver within their organisation. This one looks pretty similar to our access level project, our basic Prince2 type project, and it is fairly similar. It uses the same sort of background basis, but a key thing is it looks different. So ownership and that sort of element of personalization is very important when you're implementing something in an organization. People want to feel that it's their method, and so the language has also changed to use the terms that the organization prefers to use. So in startup, we have broadly the same sorts of documents that we had previously, but we also have some additional things. So we have some particular cost things that are required for the organisation to collect. They want to collect purchase orders and cost of sales information, etc. Many of the templates in here are changed. Now I can't show you the templates, I'm afraid, but there's a significant amount of additional information on finances that's being collected, and quite a lot of extra quality assurance going into the templates throughout the project here. Now as we come into execution here, which is quite different as a term from delivery, we see a further increase in documentation again. So now we have things called master orders and design documents, and these are standard things that are defined in the quality assurance processes for the organisation. So we want to encourage the project team to be collecting them and storing them as part of the project documentation. And then in closure, again, we have the similar sorts of things being repeated. Now, a particularly important aspect of this is getting monthly reporting right, because the data coming out of these projects is being rolled up at a portfolio, at a project grouping level by customer and by business unit for monthly reporting. So we want to encourage people to manage that information properly. So if we come into our monthly reporting tab here, we can see the documents that are required to be updated in the methodology to support the monthly reporting process. So we've got plan template, we've got our daily log, which in this instance is collecting risks and issues and lessons and quality information for projects of this size. We have our finances, and then here we have a link which will allow us to fire off an email to the PMO if we want to ask them some questions about the reporting. Now also we have a favourites tab. So the project manager can highlight some particular favourite things he wants to ask people questions about, or he wants to encourage the project team to be looking at. So using the customization capability of the method, we can put an area here for the project manager to put some things in. So if I want to add an existing document from my project in here, I can put something in. So I might want to make it quite clear that I need people to look at highlight reporting. So I'm going to put my highlight report in there, and it will show them whatever's already in the highlight report, any versions, etc. there. I could also choose to put into here some new documents. So I could put a brand new document, personalising the method, essentially as we go along here for the domain deliverables of the particular project. So into here I could put something which is variations, for example, or some other sort of thing we want to collect on the project as we go. Now obviously we've then got the ability to have many of these projects of the same type. So come into another project and it looks exactly the same, but it may have different favourites, and it might have been set up in a slightly different way to deliver against a different technical challenge. If I want to then go and have a look at the more complex method, or the method for delivering more complex projects, we see that we've got something which now starts to differ quite a lot from the sort of intermediate Prince2 project that we showed earlier, and personalization really starts to come out here, because we want to have Global Crossing decided they'd like to have a separate planning process, largely because they found that a very useful aspect of Prince2. In the 2005 version, it sort of dropped back behind the scenes in Prince2 2009, but for them that's an important aspect, so that's been retained here. So broadly, like we did in the previous version, we can work our way down through the documentation step at a time, looking at it again. Obviously we have stages that will bring in stage documentation if that's relevant. When we come through to sort of execution again here, we'll see we've got our master orders and design documents down in the stage, along with other delivery aspects like product descriptions and work packages and highlight reports, etc., and sort of controls and finance elements up in the project. Here, when we look at monthly reporting, we see a slightly different element, because we don't have a daily log, a single daily log for risk, issues, quality, etc. We're bringing that in its own particular document. So here we've got risks and issues and plan, etc., but we've still got the same sort of guidance areas here. So obviously different to the lighter method, as you would expect, but also different to our standard sort of method, and it brings out the aspects that Global Crossing want to within their management process. This one has two groups of favourites available on it. Because it's a more complex project, you may want to point at particular different combinations of documents. Okay, so skipping back to the PowerPoint, the last point I wanted to talk about was integrating methodologies. So here we're taking this to the next step. We're merging different methodologies together, and I'm going to show you two particular examples of that. The first is working with MSP, managing successful programs, and the second is a completely bespoke, customized method which allows you to link Prince2, Agile, and an in-house methodology all together within the same method framework. Okay, so we're going to come back here and look at one of my portfolios again. Now this portfolio is actually a program. We have an MSP program here, or a program built from an MSP method template, and then we have a set of projects that are being delivered as part of that program. So if I click onto the program itself, we can see we've got MSP here. And this is a fully licensed product from OGC APMG. It includes a full set of MSP templates and all the guidance in the manual broken down into useful packages for you. And so, for example, if we're interested in seeing everything associated with the business case, we can click on here and get all the documents associated with the business case, either at the the program level or the project level. So here, rather than have, in our previous methods we looked at, we were dealing with a project. So we had project level documentation and stage level documentation. Whereas here, of course, we're dealing in programs and projects within them. So if I come down here, well, I can see I don't have a business case in this particular case for my town hall extension, but I could have one in there if I wanted. So we can focus in on the particular area of interest, or we can go down and look at the particular process of interest. So if I come and look at identifying a program, here we'll see we've got documentation as we'd expect that's involved in scoping and getting set up our program. And as we work our way through into delivering the tranches and delivering the capability in particular, we see that we have again sort of more controls type documentation at the program level, but then actually down at the project level we have we want to have the documentation that's relevant to the project that we're trying to deliver. Now the project may be being delivered using Prince2 or Agile or any other method actually, and what we can do here is we can live share the documentation between the program and the project. So we can see when we set up a new project, for example, we would have an empty set of red folders. A red folder here indicates that a document just exists within the current circumstance, within the current project or program. So here it's telling to us that we might want to store a copy here or live link with the project for each of these different information areas that would be relevant to the program team when they're delivering the capability and thinking about that particular project. Now, however, we can do so we could just use this as a holder and drop into here content that's only visible to the program team, notes of meetings and all that sort of thing. We could though choose to live link with the project itself, and that's what the blue S document here implies. It's the document we're looking at is shared, it exists effectively in both places, the program and the project. So in this case I'm looking at the risk register and I can see the particular version of the risk register we're on now, 00K, and if I check it out to work on it here, it will display as checked out in the project. The project team won't be able to check it out and work on it. If the project team check it out, I won't be able to check it out and work on it, but I'll still be able to see it. And this now means the document effectively appears in both places, and it means that we can run quality assurance reports. When I run that for my program, it'll tell me the latest status and update date and lots of other information about each document within the project and each file within that document. So it allows me to include automatically within my quality assurance reviews key documents from the project. I can be notified automatically by the system when a new version of one of these is put in. And this can also work the other way, of course. So the program plan or the program communications plan or particular things of that type that we want to share into all the projects that work within the program can be shared down. And we can have different permissions on those so that we can say the program communications plan can only be changed by people at the program level, but is visible and notified to all the people at the project level. So we've got a reasonable level of sophistication there that allows us to link different things together. Now you don't just have to do this with managing successful programs and Prince2 projects. You can do this with anything within the system. So at any time you want to, if you have appropriate permissions, you can share a document between one project and another, so it physically exists in both of those. Now that means you've got a very wide range of capability in terms of integrating different methods, because in this case it's MSP and Prince2, it could be MSP and Agile, it could be your own in-house method and Prince2, it could be anything you want it to be. And actually people use this very widely for building a lessons learned library where they share the lessons logs and end project reports from all of their projects into one place, and then that's all indexed and searchable, so that people can go to just one place and search all that content to find about issues and problems and successes on previous projects. So very, very useful capability that. So moving on to the next and final method we want to look at, which is something that brings together the methods actually within the same method template. So this is that particular project. It's called PumpCo Project 1, and it's a fictitious method we made up for demonstration to a couple of customers, and actually found that it then triggered an awful lot of discussion. So it's one we use quite regularly now at demonstration. It's a customized method. Looks a bit like our basic Prince2, our entry-level Prince2 methods, start, deliver, close, but this has repeatable stages or work packages. So actually it has a more complete set of documentation associated with it. So we've got pretty much the sort of documentation we might expect to see actually in our intermediate method. Rather than it being project level and stage level, though, we've got project and work packages, because not everybody calls, the use of stage there is a Prince2 sort of term. Lots of other people will call them different things. Work packages perhaps a more generic term for them. Now this project needs to support a range of different types of work packages. The customer uses this method for a large proportion of their projects. It's that normal distribution, it's all those projects in the middle, but the projects vary quite significantly in the technical sort of work that they're delivering. The management structure wants to be broadly the same, and the project management control side, plans and risks and issues and finances and PIDs, they want to be the same on those projects, but actually what gets delivered technically is very different. So what we've done is, within the method template, we've defined a number of different types of stages or work packages that can be added to this project. So if we're doing a desk study, which many of the projects use, we've got a stage template for doing that, and we can see what it includes. At the start, it just includes a basic desk study scope. When we come on to delivery, we've got communications plans and research plans, communications, some activity, a report that we produce at the end of the desk study type of action. So that's managing something that's specific to the customer and something they do regularly. So it's if you like the stage or work package intermingled with the technical domain delivery, but that means it's very focused on the particular thing that's being trying to be achieved. Now we also have research activities that go on, and when we're running a research type of project or a stage, we want to have something which is agile in nature. So this is now using an agile type stage. It's actually exactly the same stage that we would use on our DSDM Turn Agile method, and it uses a prioritized requirements list, series of time boxes which are planned and recorded, and then deployment for the results at the end of that. And so we can run a research type activity or some sort of iterative development prototyping approach within a stage of this type. Now if in this study we come up with a marketing assessment, we decide we need a pump, we develop our pump, then we want to manufacture our pump, we're going to want to do that in a much more structured, planned way than we researched it, and we're going to therefore use a full Prince type of stage. So here we've got a Prince type of stage where we would plan, set up a whole load of product descriptions and work packages, and then deliver our way through those to implement the production of this particular pump. And then we might do another marketing assessment and review, which is again done through a desk study. So we've got again another desk study at the end. And adding these extra elements to an existing project then becomes very easy. The project manager can come and do that. From here, admin, manage work packages. Here are the ones I've already got, and if I want to add another one, I pick from the available list of stage types. We've got our default Prince2 one, desk study, DSDM, iteration. So in this case we'll add a DSDM iteration. We've got that there. If I come back to here and refresh this, now I'll close some of these others down because in practice it's very rare for you to have them all running at the same time. You'll have one or perhaps two work packages running rather than all of them. So we'll close that down. We'll see here we've now got our new DSDM iteration type of stage or work package here with all its standard templates. And that means you can start a project off with some of its stages or work packages here running, and then if you suddenly decide you need a new one, you put it into your method template and then you can insert it into your project. Very, very easy to do, and so this gives you really the ultimate sort of flexibility in terms of merging your methods. You can have a sort of merged project level methodology which defines the project controls and the startup and close down of the project that the organisation wants, and then really heavily customised delivery stages, work packages, however you want to call them, in fact, to closely align yourself with the particular type of work that's being done. Okay, so that was wrapping up that final example. Just a quick couple of finishing slides on Project in a Box in general. We've focused in this presentation on method templates and methodology because that was the topic of the conversation in the show talk. But in practice, Project in a Box goes way beyond that. The methodology is the core, and we think we're very different because we do consider our projects to be method-led. The methodology is very important, but it's not the be-all and end-all. You do need to have plans, you need to be able to manage the data out of those plans and the people associated with the activities on the project. And so we have a very sophisticated way of dealing with all those plans from Microsoft Project and Planner and Excel as well, and bringing all that data together into plans and notifications and resourcing and all that sort of thing. Communication is very important, so Outlook is interlinked here, so you can send and receive documents through Outlook. You can automatically set up and send notifications when particular things happen in the system. Reporting, again, really is something that people spend an awful lot of their time doing. People tell us they set aside Friday afternoon for putting together their reports. As we've got all that data stored within our project documentation and our database, and it's all in a consistent fashion, we can automatically assemble reports for you really very easily from either our standard data elements or from anything you choose to add into your method template. And then finally, assurance and audit tools. Because we've got all this information here, we record how users interact with it, how often things are being viewed, when they're checked out, what their current status is. We can get detailed reports by project, by groups of project, to see where all the information is and where there are holes in our process. So we can keep close track on that. Very important for the organisation to understand that, and for particular project managers to keep in touch with what people are up to. So in summary, main point has been consistency with flexibility. Hopefully we've seen how we can get some good consistency into our projects, but that's not completely rigid. We can personalise and tailor that as we need to, either ultimately by creating additional method templates or by tailoring the content once it's created from the method template. Assurance and compliance, having that structure there built into our methodology immediately gives us some channel and some process flow, and that's one of the key things that our customers talk about, being very happy that people have got a sort of touchstone and a feel through how to deliver their project, and that the project manager and the organisation can see which documents have been dealt with or not updated as frequently as they might be. And then day-to-day adoption and practicalities. So actually, although people talk about plans as when people talk about project management software, they tend to think of plans. Actually, a plan is you'll spend a relatively small amount of your time in your plan. The majority of it, you're managing documentation, approving things, sharing things with people, and Project in a Box is there to help you do that. Actually, it'll help you with your plan as well, but that's not the primary focus here. And in particular, producing quickly effective reporting. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation. It's just gone on a few minutes longer than we did at the show, but hopefully you found that useful. Pretty much like we've said here, if you've got any further questions, feel free to come back and ask us. There's a whole load of additional video tours on the website as well, picking out particular aspects of this. As I say, this one's focused predominantly on methodology because that's what we do that's different and people particularly like. But don't think that that's the be-all and end-all. There's plenty of other stuff here as well for your the other parts of your projects you need to deliver. Okay, thank you very much.